All right, welcome back. We are COMP1116, Game Programming 3 in the fall 2025 semester at Georgian, and it's week 2, part 2 of our broadcast and recording together. And in this part, we are going to talk about setting up our little FPS project for the remainder of the first half of semester. Okay, so what I'm going to do with it, the FPS project, is use it as a vehicle, and I mean that as like a demo of how to do stuff with blueprints and C++ at the same time. So I'll get you guys stepped into this. Now this course, like I said last week, is a fundamental course for you guys to do things with AI and multiplayer next semester, right? So if you don't get this course, the next semester becomes more difficult. What I recommend you guys do is start with downloading the FPS starter. Okay, so I've given you a little bit of a starter, and I did this for a couple reasons. I wanted to start off with our own little empty map that we're going to build. We're going to build everything from scratch in this project. Okay, so let's download it together. So I'm going to download it too. It's going to take me to this. You have to sign in with your Georgian email. Should be good. Okay, and then you have this. So this is just in my Georgian OneDrive, so then you can pull it down. And it's pretty big. It's 1.3 gigabytes, so it takes some time. I gave it to you in OneDrive, and I didn't give it to you on DevOps for a reason, right? DevOps, that means you'd have to access my DevOps, and it's actually sometimes easier for me to package everything together in as a zip archive. When we do our midterm and final exams, I will give you a starter, right? So I have a starter kind of like this, right, that you download, and that's why I want you to get used to it, right? So it won't be a DevOps thing or GitHub. I can't do it on GitHub anyway. It's 1.3 gigabytes. And some of the files that you'll see in Unreal Engine are really massive. Like they're more than 100 megabytes per file. That's too big, right? So that's why I'm giving it to you like this. Now, let's see whenever I get this thing. We'll go from there. Hopefully you guys are downloading it too. All right, so now that we've got this, I'm going to go to my folder. I don't need this screen anymore. And I need to unzip this. On your machine here, machine in front of you, or if you've used the one from home, you can go to Show More Options. I want to use 7-zip, right, to do it. Now on, I believe, let's see if it's Apps Anywhere. It could be Apps Anywhere, or it might even be thing. Let's see if it's Apps Anywhere. I don't think 7-zip is here. I think it might be on Software Center. Let's take a look here. Yep, it's here. So 7-zip, okay? So I prefer 7-zip over the Windows default for a bunch of reasons. The Windows default sucks. It's terrible, the decompressing program on Windows. So I've asked IT to put it here before they went on strike. It's unfortunate that they're there today. Oh, by the way, I have to mention something about that really briefly. I know that everywhere, if you look at it, it's, it kind of says that, we're still supposed to be in person and all that kind of stuff. We're still going. So far, so good. As long as there's no disruption, my plan is to continue to be here like this. If we get slowed down outside by our friends in IT or, admin, it's okay, right? If you guys come in late from that reason, or if we're starting to come in late, like this morning there was nobody, but tomorrow there might be more. I don't know. Maybe next week it'll be more, whatever, as we move through this thing. Just be polite, be nice to people, and whatever. Just wait your turn, and then you'll get in, and everything else. It's like, but what they've asked is like talk to them and see why they're on strike, kind of thing, and see if just be nice and don't be don't push through the line or anything like that or crazy. Like, get out of the way. Don't do that kind of stuff. That would be very bad, right? Be polite. All right, that's enough for that. Let's go back to this. So now that I've got this, let's get that. So I can go to my project, right click, and if I go to show more options now, I have 7-zip. What if you want to get 7-zip for home? I'm going to kind of extract it here. And I recommend it because it actually extracts things properly, as opposed to, badly. Okay? Here's my FPS starter project, right? You can get it online. So if you don't know where it is, if I download 7-zip, if you want to add it to your laptop or whatever, it's right here. Here's the download. The first one, which is 64-bit Windows x64, is the one that you want. And that's the one that you would use if you're going to do it from home. Okay, I highly don't recommend you use the Windows stuff. It'll mess you up every time. Use 7-zip, you're with me, and there's no issues. Okay? All right, that's great. So we've done that, and now if I've undone this, and now again, you can leave it out here. You can put it instead of Georgian, but this is going to be your in-class exercise 1, right? This is what it's going to be. It's going to turn into your in-class exercise 1. Let's go explore this one before we open it. So if double-click in here, you can see that there's some files in here, right? So the outer layer where it says FPS Starter Project, let's just rename this to ICE1, or ICE2, I mean, ICE2, I'll be okay. So ICE2, there's my ICE2. And I can take this now and put it inside the appropriate folder in here. So I can kind of like, cut it out here, cut, go into my folder, put it in this place next to ICE1, and click paste. And there you go. There's where that is. Okay. Again, on your folders, I highly recommend the following. If you go to the View option in Windows 11, on the bottom where it says Show, make sure you show hidden items. You want to see that. And also on the View under Show your file name extensions. You want those two things to be there, so that way you see all that stuff. And there's other options here under View. As an example. There's navigation. Item checkboxes I don't like, so I uncheck those. I don't like item checkboxes. I hate that, right? So I uncheck those things. That's just me. Next, now that you have this, there's a couple ways to start this off. If I've got my Unreal Engine here, here's my library, right? I could launch it and start from scratch and open it up the project another way. What I would recommend instead is just launch it right from your files here in your folder. So if you go to your folder, and if you notice that there is an FPS Starter Project U project, see what that is? The U project extension tells you this is an Unreal Engine project. I just I sorted it by name this time and by type. And at the bottom, what I want to do is I want to right click onto it, and if I go to show more options, we're going to see this. Then there's change engine version. That's what we want, change Unreal Engine version. Please do that, right? And then it'll say 5.5. It'll be the only one that's available because I did this last year when we were using 5.4, and now we're using 5.5. So I'd like you to change the version to 5.5 and press OK. Once we've done that, then if I double click on this thing, it should launch Unreal Engine. It says allow, yes, we'll allow it, or press no, it doesn't matter. And it'll still launch, it should still launch. So here's it launching. When it launches for the first time, just like last week I was showing you, it's going to go through compiling of shaders. You can see that there's 1,400 shaders or whatever that need to launch, and it's going to write all those shaders. Okay? This project that I've just given you, ICE, that's going to be ICE2, we're going to duplicate it next week. So we're not going to add to it. Okay, I'm not doing that. I'm going to take that project and duplicate it into a separate repository. So every repository we make is going to be another version of this project here. We're going to build on this one. So this is the first one that we're going to be using for all the other ones until mid-semester, our mid-semester test. Next half, we'll use a different project altogether that I'll share with you. Okay, so it's going to take a moment, and once it goes through and it compiles all your shaders, then if you've installed Unreal Engine properly on the machine that you're using at home, and it's definitely installed properly on the machine in front of you, then you'll see something that looks like this. Okay, Wait till it says preparing shaders for it to be done. Okay. So why did I do this? Why don't I just start off with a basic thing? Well, I've given you everything you need for this project for the most part. Everything that's in here, I think most of it is there even for the exam. Like you've got a starter that I kind of created for you guys right here. My conventions, a couple things. Let's do this together. So I'm going to go to Edit when we first start off, and let's go to Project Settings. Sorry, Editor Preferences. Editor Preferences. And what I want to do with Editor Preferences is I want to scroll down, and where it says Asset Editor Open Location Main Window, that's what I've done. Okay, that's my convention. So that means that whenever I open up a new window for blueprints, it's going to open up here. It's not going to open up down here. I don't want that. The other thing I'd like to do is when I look at my content drawer, which is on the left here, right, I want to dock and layout. So I want to click this dock and layout thing on the content drawer. So now you're going to see, if I click that, you're going to see something that looks like this. Okay, that's how I prefer to work. I want to dock my content drawer here like this. The other thing I like to see when I'm working is my output window. Okay, so if you go to Window, and if you go to Output Log here, it should dock nicely next to this content browser as a separate tab. Okay, that's the second thing I like. All right, and so we need the output window because this is your console window that we're going to be using as we start building things in Unreal Engine. Now I've done a couple things here to set up, right? I've added some things here in lighting on the right hand side. One thing that's different about Unreal Engine than Unity is, again, you don't have scripts available to you here. I can't like add a script like I can do in Unity. And some of these things that you see here are actors, right? And some of them are just things like this, player start, right? So if I want to find where the player start is, you know, I can see what this is. There's a little capsule that's here. You can see that that's the player start. Okay, so if I move around, and again, from an orientation perspective, remember that if I right mouse click, this is why, guys, if you don't have a 3-button mouse, right, for your laptop, get it. I'm not going to go and do three fingers and do that. Get another mouse, guys. You need it for everything. You need it for Blender. You need it for everything that you're going to be doing, right? So especially when you're doing 3D, 3-button mouse, go buy one today if you don't have one. So right mouse button will allow me to do one of these where I can kind of move around. I have a camera really that I'm using here in my viewport, and I'm moving my camera around, okay? Then if I hold the right mouse button down and I use my WASD keys, I can fly around in the scene just like I would normally do. I can go through the floor, I can come back out, I can do whatever I want to do and move around, okay? That's definitely a way of navigating around this thing, okay? One thing that's different about Unreal Engine that maybe you haven't noticed it, maybe Steve mentioned it or not, compared to Unity, is that Z is up. And Unity, what is up? Y, right? So Y is up in Unity in 3D. Here, Z is up, right, which is different. That's number one. So the orientation for your 3D, is completely different here in Unreal Engine, okay? It's the same thing for these handles. You can move things around up and down and all that kind of stuff. And hopefully Steve has given you a bit of a tour by now, second week, so you know how to use the basics of Unreal Engine, okay? All right, so that's the first thing. Now, what I want to do is in Content Browser, I want to go to All, and you can see that there is content here. And inside my content, I want to add a new folder. I want to call this Blueprints. Here's Blueprints, right? And in my blueprint, I want to go in there and I want to add a new blueprint class, this one right here, blueprint class. And that new blueprint class, I'm going to inherit from the character class. There's my character class, right? And I'm going to call this BP_FPS character. BP stands for blueprint. All right, that's how I do it. Actually, it's a convention, blueprint, BP, right? And we're going to see other conventions like that as well. Okay. If this is too big for you or too small, there's a couple things you can do. You can use your control key and zoom in and out right here. You can do that. You can also go to settings and you can go to thumbnail size and change that from medium to large or whatever you like, right? So I'm going to make mine a little bigger so you can see it. All right, so that's the first thing. Next, let's double click on this thing. It should bring it up in your main window like this. Okay, this is your main window, right? And what this is showing us here is all the components. So this is kind of neat. In Unity, you have, when you have an object, as an example, you see the component hierarchy in Unity right inside the hierarchy. Like you actually see it, right? Even if it's a prefab in Unity, you see like all the entire hierarchy in there, right? But here, what you're seeing is, this is where you see the detail, right? For your FPS character, not here on your main map. We might bring my FPS character in here eventually, but you won't see all the details of everything else. You only see it in here. So there's this. This is your component tab. Your component tab is a bunch of stuff. One of them is the capsule component, which is your collision capsule. So this is the capsule that we're going to use to collide with other things inside the scene for our character, okay? The arrow component is simply tells us the direction we're facing, right? That's the proper direction to face. The mesh component, right now, there isn't one, okay? And there's also built in the character movement component. So again, remember that character, it inherits from your pawn class. Pawn inherits from actor. That's the inheritance chain, okay? So, you know, pawn is something we can possess, but pawn does not include all this stuff. It doesn't include character movement. It doesn't include all that stuff. What I want to include here now in the mesh, let's add in some of the stuff that I already have. So under skeletal mesh asset on the right-hand side here in the details view, there are some mesh arms. Okay, here's the mesh arms that you can add in. And if I do that, add mesh arms, you see that they're floating way up here. Okay? And they're floating way up here because that's the default location of these mesh arms. So we can definitely use these handles to bring them down to something that looks a little bit like this. Okay? And the other thing that we want to add in here is we definitely want to add a camera of some kind, right? Because we want to look through the character's eyes as they're moving, right? So for now, I moved them down to like -110. I don't know if that's right, as an example. And I definitely want to add a camera. So let's add that in next. So we'll say add a camera. There we go. Here's the camera. And what I want to do is I want to position this camera so it's at the height of the character's eyes, something like this. I don't know, like that. You can see that the arms and the camera aren't really aligned that well. The camera is also like inside the mesh of the character. That doesn't, I don't like that, right? So the way you can do that, if you drag the camera up to the capsule component, it will now be separate from the mesh. Okay? Here's something. Can I drag the mesh inside my camera? No, I cannot. And the reason why I can't do this changing of what my mesh is, or my arrow, or my capsule, or anything like that, is because this is defined inside of the character. See up in the top right corner? There's the character class that I'm inheriting from. Okay? That's what I'm doing right now. All right, so that is what this is doing. So the first thing is the camera. So the camera is now separate from the arms, right? And what I want to do is, on the right-hand side, there is another animation area here. So there's animation and there's mesh. And I've actually clicked on the mesh, character mesh 0 here on the left-hand side. So on the right-hand side, what I want to do is, instead of using animation blueprint, we don't have one, I want to use an animation asset instead. And in this case, I want to use arms idle. So if you look at, you kind of scroll down, and if you see that this is an arms idle, you can choose that. And you can see now that I'm going to have my arms idle in here. Now, they're not kind of centered properly. And by the way, if your camera is moving too fast on the top right corner like mine was, you can see that the camera speed is 1. You can reduce that camera speed just by pulling it to the left. And now the camera speed will move a little bit slower and smoother inside of your viewport. Okay? So this is what you should have right now. Okay? And it's kind of funny to see like these detached arms in front of a camera, but the old school video games that I used to play, because I got a Hotmail account, right? Is was kind of like this. You had a camera, and all you saw was arms and weapons and stuff like that, right? And that's kind of what you had, all right? So I want to compile and save this right now, just as is, right? I'm not changing any numbers or anything like that. I just moved this down to -110. I put the camera at a certain place. We'll adjust this. I have some numbers inside the PowerPoint we can use, okay? But what I want to do is, the next thing I want to build is I want to build another blueprint. Let's do this another one. So I want to add another blueprint, please. Let's do this together. So I want to do a blueprint blueprint class, and in this case, I want to use game mode base. Game mode base, right? And I want to name this BP underscore FPS game mode. BP underscore FPS game mode, okay? And BP underscore FPS game mode is what I'm going to use. If I double click onto this, I talked about game modes briefly in my PowerPoint presentation. So if you actually look at the PowerPoint, and if I go through this, right, for a homework for last week, right, I kind of did all this with you just now. I did move these things around, right, and I adjusted, you know, kind of minus 90 and minus 90 for rotation. I did all these different things, and then I kind of moved it back so that it's like minus 90 for the location for the arms idle. The camera, which I added before, I put it at a value of 55. So let's adjust those things just to make sure that we've got what we want. So I'm going to go back to FPS game mode in a second. Go to camera, and then, so I did it 50, put it to 55. I think it's a better number. And then minus 90 for the location of the arms. So arms, if I go to the mesh, instead of minus 110, let's put, maybe we'll move it back to there again, but minus 90 is where I want it right now. Okay, so that's where I kind of had it there for a bit. We might move it back again. We put arms idle in there. We did all that. And then for the MPS game mode, what it allows us to do, if I go back to that, is on the right-hand side for the FPS game mode, you can see that there's a bunch of different classes that it defines. One of them is the game session. And the game session, you know, it's used a lot of times, you know, as an example, if you hover over, it says class of game session, which handles login, approval, and online game interfaces. Okay, so we don't have any login. We have no security, so we don't need to change the default. So the default can move. Game state class. If I hover over that, right, it says class of game state associated with the game mode. So game state is interesting because we can have stuff like, you know, information about the player, what their score is, and some stuff. In many ways, when I think about game state, I think about game controller in Unity. You might have a game controller that has extra functionality that keeps track of the score, or, you know, allows other functionality. That's where this is. That's what game state would do for us. It kind of persists from one level to another here, and so that's why I use game state for that. Player controller class. The class player controller to spawn for players logging in. We don't have any players logging in, so for now, player controller can remain default. Right? Player state. Player state of this class will be associated with every player to replicate relevant player information to all clients. Replication happens with multiplayer. Since we don't have multiplayer, we can leave this as default. Right? HUD class. We don't have any HUD. We can leave this as default. Default pawn class. This is the one we want to change. If I go to default pawn, we can select our new BP underscore FPS character that we just had. So that is the default pawn class for this game mode. Spectator class. Sometimes what we have is a spectator pawn that can, you know, kind of be in the game as well. There is a default spectator pawn that we can use, and that's used if you want to have a spectator at the same time that you're having a play. And sometimes we use that for an extra monitor. Sometimes we use it for a bunch of different reasons. Okay. And other ones. Okay, we don't need any of this stuff now. So this is all we have to change. Just change the default pawn class to BP underscore FPS character, and then click compile and save, and then we can close off our BP underscore FPS game mode. All right? But we need to use this game mode, and in order for us to use this game mode, then what we can do is we can go to edit, and if I go to project settings this time, project settings, we can pull this up here too if you want. And if I go to maps and modes, and again, maybe Steve would have done this. Right now, notice that the default game mode is the game mode base, the default thing. We want to change this default game mode to our new BP underscore FPS game mode that we just made. Okay? And what this does is basically say, hey, our default pawn class is our BP underscore FPS character that we want to spawn in the game in the player start position when we start. Okay? And notice also we see that we have our starter map is test map. That's the one I made for you guys. Okay? And that's where it starts. So if I was to run this thing now, let's compile and save everything. And let's just run this thing. You should see these arms right in your face, like this. Okay? And you can see that there's an idle animation because we're using the idle animation. This is way too close, and the positioning is not quite right. Okay? So you can see that that is like way wrong, right? So, and all I did again was just, I didn't put the player in play. If I press play, one thing to note here is on the right-hand side, take a look at the right, inside of your outliner. In the outliner, you can see that there is an BP underscore FPS character that was spawned. There it is right here, right? And there's also a BP underscore FPS game mode that's also spawned in here on the right. So this is something that's inside of play mode. When things are playing, you can see these things are running, okay? One thing to note as well, really quickly, is this button right here. So not only do we have the play button, but we have this button right here, which detaches the player. Does Steve do this with you guys? Let's click this button that says detach the player for a second. If I do that, suddenly what I can do is I'm freed from using this player. And this is what this player might look like so. I'm going to move it so it's a little bit just smoother. All right, there we go. So you can see that that is the camera, and the player just sits there like on their own like this. You should be able to look at the player. This is a great thing to do sometimes, because what we want to do is detach our camera from the player when we're inspecting it to see if we see the right things. Okay, a couple weird things that I don't like, or you might not like. First of all, we don't see the camera. We can make the camera appear if we really want to in the scene. The other thing is this. This is weird, right? We don't want to see these like shadows. That's like a pretty ugly shadow that we have there. So let's stop this play, all right? And let's go back to the BP underscore FPS character. And if I go to the right where it says details here, while I have my mesh selected, and if I type in shadow, right? You can see, or just shad, you can see here on the right says lighting, cast shadow, checked. Let's uncheck that. So no more casting shadows from my arms. Good reason about this too is, an amazing thing for this is, that performance is improved. Shadows are actually very expensive, right? Because what you're actually doing is creating a shadow map that follows along with the player, and a bunch of other stuff. We don't need it because it looks weird. It's detached from our body. If it was like, if we had a full body and we had shadows, okay. But we don't need that here. All right, so let's go back to this. So we've done this nicely, and we've added the maps and mode stuff, and now we have some numbers that can help out, because it's, you know, the numbers we had were pretty ugly. Let's do that. So let's change our location of, you know, again, what it says is, when you're running the game, it says the arm placement is more appropriate. So we want to change that arm placement to these numbers. I found that these numbers are pretty good, so 0.71. So it's going to off-center it a little bit. So that means that this, let's just take away this, you know, this thing. The location here should be that. So it kind of adjusts it a little bit to the left. Minus 104, so a little bit down from here, minus 104. So down here, that's a little better. And then I've also suggested a slight rotation with the arms of 0.154823, right? And that's here, right? And once we have all that, and if I was to compile, save, and run again, you're going to see a better placement for the arms. Something that looks like this, okay? I think it's a better placement. Would you agree? Again, all I did was I just went to the mesh. So if I go back to the mesh, the mesh here, I clicked on the mesh, and then I get this transform. This is similar to what we get in Unity transform, where we have position in Unity, rotation, and scale. Here we have location, rotation, and scale. Same thing, where the X represents is red, the Y is green, and the blue is, sorry, the Y is green and the Z is blue. I'll be okay. So great, we have arm positioning, that looks good. I want to add into the mesh, I want to add a rifle. So what you can do is you can attach another mesh here. So I can go click add. And I want to add a static mesh, I think, is what we're going to add. We're going to call this the gun mesh. And it's going to be a child of the character mesh, okay? So going back to the PowerPoint, you can see that that is something that we're going to do, right? We added, oh, am I adding a skeletal mesh? Sorry, let's go back there. I didn't know if it was a skeletal mesh or a static mesh. I think it's a skeletal mesh. Let's delete that and try again. So again, on the mesh, I'm going to click add, and I'm going to add a skeletal mesh. Now, skeletal mesh is interesting. We'll call this the gun mesh. And it's different than a regular mesh. Think about Blender, and think Blender as a static mesh, no bones. And Blender with a skeletal mesh, bones inside the skeletal mesh, right? So you have a rig, and the reason why the gun might have a rig is it might have extra points that you want to control, things that you want to turn on and off or move. And that's why the gun might have those things. So in the gun mesh, if I go back to the skeletal mesh asset, you can see that there's a few of them. One of them is a gun, but the gun is going to appear way down here at the bottom. And this is no good. I want it to snap into my arms, and I could literally put it there, but there's actually a better way of doing this. So one thing that I want you guys to do is once we've got the gun attached to the gun mesh here in the mesh options. So again, all I did was I added a skeletal mesh as a child of the static of this other skeletal mesh, right? That's what I did. And then I've selected the gun as one of these things. That's what I've done, okay? Once I've done that, and I've got the gun down here, what I want to do is I want to double click here. So here's where you double click. If I double click here, it's going to bring me up, bring up the gun, mesh itself. So this is the mesh. And it's interesting what you get here. You can actually kind of view the gun separately. So again, what you can do is change your view, so you can see the gun. There it is, right? As an example, you can see the gun. And then this is okay, but what I really want from this is I want to see what kind of sockets it has. And notice that there is a couple of options up here at the top. What I want you to choose is this little skeleton guy up here. See this little skeleton guy? Choose that. And what it's going to do is going to pull up the gun skeleton. So there's two parts. There's the gun mesh, right? So that's a mesh, and there's the gun skeleton. The gun skeleton itself on the left, you can see has all kinds of really interesting things, right? So I wanted to show you this as well. So there's the suppressor, right? You can see that it has like a skeletal structure, right? It also has a reload, built cover, and a bunch of other stuff that you can have here. And that's why this thing is a skeletal mesh as opposed to a regular mesh. It has bones. Okay, kind of cool. Let's close this off. So let's do the same thing now. Instead of this, let's do the same thing to the arms. So if I go back up to the arms, and if I double click on the arms down here, the arm mesh, right, then I'm going to get this. Here's my arm mesh, right? And if I go here and if I go to the little skeleton, then on the left, you can see that here's what the skeleton looks like for the arms, right? So lots and lots of like bones you can see here. And if I scroll down, you're going to see that there is a grip point. Here's the grip point itself, right? And this grip point is something called a socket, right? So Unreal does this a little differently than Unity does, okay? The socket, what it does is it's a virtual object that gets connected to the bone. So it's kind of bound to the bone. So wherever that bone is, in this case, that bone is the middle, finger on the right hand. That's what it is. All right, so that's where the bone is. That's where that gun is going to go, right on this middle finger, right here. That's where that socket is. And it's the grip point. This is where the hands are going to grip around the, the grip of the gun, kind of thing, okay? So that's where that is. You can have multiple sockets for any skeletal mesh that you want. Multiple. Like for example, maybe there's going to be other things that I want to attach to the gun. For example, a scope. So I can have, there might be a socket on the gun, right, which is the scope socket, and then that's where the socket would attach. So if I want to add a scope because I bought it from a store in the game, it would just snap to that location, which is kind of neat, right? And so I can do all those kind of things, which is neat. So let's get back to this. So now that I've got I know grip point is the socket name. That's what I want to use. I don't have to do any changes. I've already done this for you guys. I want to go back to here, and I want to click on the gun mesh, and then at the top where it says sockets, I want to click on this little folder with a search icon, and I want to select the grip point. That's what I want to do here. So again, I've clicked on the gun mesh, select the grip point, and all of a sudden, boom, your gun appears exactly where it should be. Okay, and this is what you should have right now. Okay, so you don't have to position it. I have positioned it for you. Now, we're going to have to adjust this when we add a reticle next week. We do some firing and all that kind of stuff, okay? We're going to have to adjust the gun. You can actually adjust it up and down and left and right and all that kind of stuff manually yourself. You will do this, right? You will adjust the grip point. But for now, this is okay for today, okay? All right, so let's compile and save this, and let's try this out in game. And you can see here that I can't do anything with it, but I'm idling, and you can see a gun that's right here, right? Now, if I was aiming down the sights, then what I'd want is, if I have an animation taking down the sights, I want the gun to snap to this position. That's all I'm doing. When I'm moving my arms, they're going to do one of these. They're going to snap down into this position. That's what's going to happen with the gun. For now, we're good. We're okay. All right, so now that I have this part, I want to start adding some movement to this. And I want to do this in a systematic way. So back to content, I want to add a new folder. And I want a new folder called inputs. And I could continue, but one thing we're missing, what are we missing that we haven't done yet? This is ICE 2. What are we missing that we haven't done yet? Yes? DevOps. We have to put this up on DevOps. How do you do this? How do you put this whole project up on DevOps? What the hell do you do with this massive insanity here? Okay? Let's spend some time doing that right now before we continue. Okay? Because we got part of our project done. We've got our character installed. This is like, we've added some project files. We could have done this earlier. So how do we do this? So first, file, save all. Let's do that. Okay? Next, let's close out of this whole insanity. Let's just literally close down Unreal Engine, and let's get back into our folder structure. And let's take a look at what we have here. So when we launched it, we never had this derived data cache. Now we do. Okay? And what you see here is a bunch of different things. We have config and whatever, but we don't really have a gitignore file and a git attributes file. The gitignore file and the git attributes file that we had for our C++ were for our C++ project. This is not going to be sufficient for our project right here. Okay, I just wanted to show you this. So yes, we could initialize everything from here, and the way we would do that is we'd right-click here, and I would say open in terminal. And then open in terminal, I've got a terminal here, and then I can do git add and git init and all that stuff. We're going to do that in a second. However, let's open it up one more time. Okay, let's get back to this. Open this up one more time. There are some tricks we can use. Okay, so I just wanted to show you this. I'm going to close it and open and make sure that you guys are good. I also want to see that when you close it down and open it, you got everything we just did. Okay, so somehow you saved everything, because we're going to do saving and loading a lot of times. Just keep my eye on the times, lots to do. Look at this. It says one asset editor was open. Do I want to remember my choice? The answer is yes. I want to click remember my choice and click yes, and then it's going to open my asset editor to BP_FPS character, just like we had before. I don't want to keep opening it by hand. Next, on the right, the bottom right corner of the screen, you can see that there's a little thing on the bottom right here. So you see what I see on the OBS here. I'm blocking it. I'm just going to move my camera here. One second. I'm just going to move my camera to the other side just so you can see it. There we go. And I'm just going to go back to Unreal Engine. On the right, you can see that there is a revision control option. Okay, let's click onto that, and I want you to click connect to revision control. Okay, connect to revision control. And when we do that, it says, what's the provider, right? So if you scroll down, we want to use Git. Notice there's other ones. We want to use Git, all right? And then it says, okay, so here's Git beta version. Here's my executable that I'm using for my Git. It has a URL of where I'm pushing to, and it says a bunch of other stuff. It says add a basic README file, okay? Where it says developed with Unreal Engine 5. Okay, I could do that right now, but I want to say no, we'll add our own. Okay, so let's click off that one. Add a gitignore file, yes. How about this one? Add a git attributes file to enable git LFS support. That's large file support. We definitely want to do that. Okay, let's click on that one. Okay, so those two things must be checked on. And then why am I doing this? Because we're going to get our beautiful git attributes file and gitignore file right from here, and we don't have to find them, search them online, or anything like that. And let's click initialize project with Git. All right, and give it a second. Let it do its thing, and let's do accept settings. Right there we go. And once we've done our accept settings, I want you to go back to revision control, my friends, and change revision control settings again. And I want you to disable revision control. Okay, so we just we used it. We were like, I'm going to be a user and use you to make my gitignore and git attributes file and get out of here after that. I never want to use this again. Okay, why? It's bad. All right, Unreal Engine's built-in Git stuff. I would love for it to work properly. It does not. Okay, there is just not a great way of using it. I use it strictly for the gitignore and git attributes file and set up my initialization. And in fact, I can just kill all that and start over. So I'm going to go back to my folder now. Let's close this down again. And let's go back to my folder. Here we are. And in my folder now, you can see I have a gitignore file and a getAttributes file, and also a hidden .git folder. Okay, those are the three things I have. Okay, I'm going to take it even further. I'm going to kill this .git folder. So right click and delete it. All right, I'm going to do it from scratch here. I just need these two files, getAttributes and gitignore file. And these are strictly for Unreal Engine, not for Visual Studio. Okay, I'm going to say that again because if you took these and used it for last week, it won't work properly. Okay, but for this week, this is what we need. So I want to right click here and then I want to open up the terminal. Open in terminal, please. Okay, now let's do this from scratch. The first command is what? Git init. That's the first command. So I'm going to make this window a little bit bigger. So I'm going to go to settings and I'm going to go to appearance. And let's see if I can make this window a little bit bigger. Window PowerShell. Is it color schemes? No, not colors. Okay, maybe not. I'm not going to do it right now. I'll find out what it is. But really what I'm looking for is my fonts. Launch size. I don't care about the launch size. Interactions, I don't care. I think it's appearance, but where? It's different than the command prompt. Anyways, I don't know if you guys found it, but actions, new tab window. Maybe defaults. Icon, tab, terminal, command prompt. No, I don't know what it is. So let's just leave it alone. Yeah, and let's try that again. So I'm going to go right click and I'm going to go open in terminal. And then in here, what I want to do is I want to do the first command, which is git init. Okay, that's my first command, git init. So git init initializes my Git repository. Let's press enter on that one. So you can see it says initialize empty Git repository, and then this is my user. Okay, are you with me? Why? Okay, so the way to do this instead, here's another way of doing it. Let's say you don't have this. All right, another way of doing this is let's navigate back up to the folder. So here, to this level. And let's just do it again. I'm going to erase Git and do it again for you. Okay, so let's delete this one. So I'm going to just click this and delete it. And I'll start again just for you. Okay? So one way to do it is to get to this point where you see ICE2. See that? Let's go back to the command, to the start button and press in CMD for command. CMD is going to bring up your command line, okay? And then now, this one I definitely have options, I believe, where I can change my, okay, maybe I don't. Rendering, graphics. I'll find out. Anyways, let's just close this one off. It's weird, I thought I had options for that. I will modify it later. Anyways, what I want you to do is I want you to press in C:\enter. C:\enter will put you into the C drive. Okay, so that's what it does. It actually switches volumes. So it goes from the G drive to the C drive. That's very important to know. Okay. Otherwise, you'll be stuck in the G drive. That's probably your personal drive or whatever it is here at Georgia, or the H drive. Next, I want you to press in CD space. This means change directory. That's what it means. And then I want you, while keeping this window open, I want you to drag and drop your ICE2, right? So CD space, and then drag and drop your ICE2 in here like this. Okay? And then what you're going to get is a path that gives you the right path. So instead of you having to type in that long path that you can't possibly remember, it's an easy way of doing that. Okay? So if you ever have a problem, whether it's at home or whether it's here, and you can't open up the folder in a particular spot, you can just do CD space, drag the folder into your command prompt, and you're good to go. Okay? Next, let's do that git init again. So git init, and then press enter. And you can see that it'll say initialized empty repository. Next command that I want to use is what? What's my next command? I initialize my git, and now what I want to do is, what's next? Yes? Commit. Right, so git commit. But there's one thing I want to mention that we should inspect. Before we continue, please, don't add anything yet. If I open up my ICE2, and let's open up my getAttributes file, if I right click, and if I go open with, and let's use a notepad for now, And let's see what this looks like, right? It looks like this. That's all I have for my, my LFS filter, right? Get attributes. So here is where I can add in all the stuff that I want to filter, you know, with my, my stuff, right? So you can add stuff to filter in, okay? Like, and I'll give you more things in here, you know, to add later on. But for the most part, what this is going to do is it manages, you know, like the stuff that I want to ignore. So, or that I want to track as large file support. Okay. So before we move on, let's type in git LFS and see what that tells me to do. Okay. Git LFS and then type in and see what it tells me. So what it's telling me to do here is this. It says, this is cool. Let's type in the following. So git, right? LFS install, and then press enter. Okay, and you should have something that looks like this. Updated git hooks, git LFS initialized. Are you with me? Now, why do we need to do this? Because we're actually activating large file support. Our map and a lot of other stuff inside of our application is very, very large. So what we want to do is flag UAssets as the thing that we want to use LFS support on. And the way to do that is where it says git LFS track star ISO, right? This will be added into my file right here, my git attributes file. Let's see how this works. So I'm going to close my git attributes file down. And then down here, I want to start tracking some of the files from my project. And let's see what my files are in my content. So if I go to my content, and if I go to blueprints, you can see that I have a U asset ending for it, right? And you're like, well, why do I care about that? Right now, they're only like 35K. Okay, that's cool. What about my other stuff, like maps and stuff? So if I go to content again, and if I go to assets, and if I go to my drone, you know, as an example, you can see that my asset for my drone, one asset, this one here is 5 megs, 5.4 megabytes, right? So, and sometimes they'll be like 100 megabytes. Like some of these materials might be really large, right? You know, as an example. Right now they're pretty small, and there's might be other ones in here. But I definitely want to track all U asset files. So this is the way I want to do it. And so I want to go down here and start putting that in. I want to say git LFS track star.U asset. Please spell this properly. Okay, so U asset is definitely something I want to track. Okay, U asset because it'll track all the assets that are in Unreal Engine as large files, right? So let's press enter on that one. Okay, tracking U asset. That's important. What did this do when I did this? If I double click, if I go back out to the folder for ICE2 and I double click on git attributes again, and if it's going to go into Notepad. Now let's take a look what we've added. We've added this new line, star U asset filter is equal to LFS. It added this for me. Every time I do an LFS track on the command line, it adds another entry in my git attributes file. Okay, that's what it's doing. Okay, I need this for a bunch of stuff. So here's the stuff that I recommend. U asset for sure. The other one is if I go to content and if I go to maps, UMap is a good one to use too, because maps can get very large. Like right now mine's very small, but it could become much larger. Let's add UMap in there as well. So UAsset and UMap for sure, and we're going to add other ones later. So let's do git LFS track star.umap, right? And that's definitely something I want to add in as well. Are you with me? Okay. I'm telling you this, guys, because if you're going to try and put this up on DevOps or on GitHub or someplace else, it's going to sometimes the files, especially not now, but later on as we progress in the course, the files get larger and larger and larger. Our project is going to be massive and it won't work properly. And this is why we have to do this. Okay, now that we have a couple things, you know, kind of set up here in our project, and the two main ones. Again, you can search for other ones in here. Like if you want to go inside of our content and see other things that you think are important, like for example, so starter content, if I go to textures, you see that they're all U assets here. And some of them are like 10 megs, 12 megs. The ones that I worry about are the ones that are like 100 megs, you know, or 200 megs, you know, as an example that you might see here. You don't see much of anything in here. And same thing with materials. This is the stuff from the starter content. You see that they're pretty small, right? So there's not like a lot there. Architecture, so U assets again, you can see that they're not that large, right? Audio files can get very massive, especially if it's an MP3, so they can be really big. So far, not so big, right? And a bunch of other stuff like that. So you can see most of this stuff that you're going to cover, you're going to get with U asset, which is pretty good. All right, so now that we got that, now we can do our next thing, which is git commit minus m and initial commit. Okay? And so what did I do wrong? I didn't do a git add dot. That's the next thing we have to do wrong. So I did that one first, but what I really need to do is I need to do a git add first. Git add dot. I forgot to do that. Git add dot. Git add dot. What it does is it will add all the assets. It might take a second. Notice that second that it elapsed, git add, it took a second to check all the assets that are in my project that I want to add into my commit. Next, let's do that commit again. Let's go back up and just use your up arrow on your keyboard. Instead of typing it again, you can use your up arrow on your keyboard to kind of put that up again. Okay, and then press enter. And this time it'll do this. It'll say, here's all the stuff that are going to be tracked. U asset, blah, blah, blah. Okay? All right, so now that we have all of this, we have our U assets, and we have all that stuff tracked with our git ignore and git attributes file. We're ready now to push everything up to the thing.
If mine just did that to start with, does that mean I did something else wrong?
What do you mean?
Well, I didn't have to. Well, I typed that first and just let me. Oh, okay. That doesn't mean I didn't.
No. Just do git add and git commit and fine. Okay. All right, let's take a look now. Let's take a look here now, the next part, which is I want to do a git status. So git status basically tells us if anything is left to do. Git status is the command we're going to use. And the other one we can use is git log. There's git log. So what git log shows us is the log of all of our commits, right? You can see here our commit is very long, right? This is a typical commit. A commit is created by taking your computer name and the date and a bunch of other stuff and to create a unique hash that is unique across the entire world. It's like, many characters, right? And so each of your commits is probably going to be unique compared to everyone else's. I don't think I've ever seen two commits that are the same. That's how, kind of diverse these are. Now, on GitHub or on DevOps, you might only see the first 10 characters of your commit, and the rest are hidden. You don't need to see all of them, but you can see that the commit is actually quite large, okay? Next, I want to connect this to DevOps, which means I need to create this thing on DevOps. Let's do that now. So I'm going to go back up to DevOps, right? Again, I've bookmarked mine. You should do the same to yours if you haven't done it already. I'm going to go to my project's home. And there could be some issues we're going to handle in a second, okay? That's why I'm telling you all this stuff. And I'm going to go to my COMP1116. This is it right here, all right? And what I'm going to do here is under repos, right? I'm going to click repos. And I want to make a new one, a new repository. I want to call yours ICE2. Here's ICE2. I do not need a README, so uncheck this README file, please. Don't use that README file. And I don't want to add a git ignore file because I already have them. I'm going to click create here, right? When I do that, I have some stuff here that I can use. But before I add this in, remember there's one command that I want to add in manually myself. So I'm going to go back to my command prompt here. And here's the command that I'm going to add in manually, right? So git branch minus capital M main is what I want to add in. And what this is going to tell Git is that the main branch is my default branch. That's what I'm basically saying, okay? I don't want it to choose master as a branch or some other name. I want to choose my own name for branch. So git branch minus M main minus capital M. It has to be capital M, okay? Next, let's add my remote. And the way to do this is grab this part and up until and including just ICE2. Do not grab this last part, git push origin. I want to do that by myself. So when I grab this part right here, okay? I'm going to copy it, Control C. And then I want to right click here. So this is what I'm going to do. So I did Control C and then I right clicked and it'll give you that. If you press enter, it'll add the remote to your Git repository. Let's check that. So if I do a Git remote by itself, you're going to see origin. Okay? That's what you should see. If I want to see what the origin remote is, it's git remote -v. And if I did that, you can see that I have origin, both a fetch and push. Remember what this is. The origin remote is our connection. It's the friendly name for our connection between your local repository and DevOps, or GitHub, if you're using GitHub. Okay? That's what the origin remote is. Are you good? Okay, I didn't know, because I know you had problems last time.
Yeah, I don't really know that the problem.
Oh, you don't have DevOps?
I do, it's just, I don't think it's connected to my computer. I think that's what the issue is. It's like it's not.
Okay, I'll come back to you after. Stick around. Next, this git push -u origin -all. I don't mind this one. So let's copy this one separately and go back and then right click. And then, warning, I'm just going to tell you this right now. Sometimes this will fail. And it'll fail for a couple reasons before I do it. That's why I waited for me to do this part, okay? Here's the reasons why it might fail. You may have to change some of your configuration for Git locally, right? For example, Git uses HTTP, I think it's 2, and we may have to go back to HTTP 1, right? Like actually change some stuff around here. It also will probably get you to log in. If you've never logged into DevOps before on the machine in front of you, if you're doing this for the first time like I am, it might ask me to log in for the first time, okay? So let's add it in and see what happens. There it is. This is what it's going to do for me. It's going to ask me to log in for the first time, which is what it should ask you to do. And does it work? Good. If it fails, it'll give you issues why it fails. So here I'm going to log in for the first time. So I'm going to say me. Make sure you guys do this properly. And then it'll ask me for my password. And then, if I did everything properly, it's going to push everything up and load all the, the stuff one thing at a time. You can see how it takes long, and look how much I'm pushing up, guys. Right now, my project size is over 1 gigabyte, right? So doing this to GitHub is possible, but for large files, GitHub only supports a maximum of 100 megabytes. Here, there's no limit. All right, so, and then what we want to do is wait. This is not done. Wait until this is completed for the first time. Hey, look at that. Now let's check out my DevOps and see if it's done. This is required, guys, for your in-class exercise 2. Okay, you need to do this. So back in DevOps, if I refresh, you're going to see this. Okay, that's what you should see. Are you with me? Except for you. Right? You good? Everyone good? Anyone not good? All right. This is fundamental. Like, we need to be able to do this kind of stuff. So now I've put up my initial project. I've given a snapshot of my code. And now, as we go into Unreal Engine, we can continue with more things. Let's add the blueprints, and then after we add the blueprints and movement, we'll stop, take a short break, and then I'll switch into C++. Okay, let's do that. Again, I'm rushing because there's a lot to do, and we have no time. All right, back into Unreal Engine. So back into here, I want to go back into this and double-click on my project to bring it up. Here it is. And it should bring us back up exactly where we had it before. So like no changes or anything else. Like Git didn't do anything. All we've done is we basically, check mark all the files that we want to, to put up on DevOps, right? Here we are. What we want to do is I want to start adding stuff in my input. So I made an input folder last time, yes? And that's inside my content folder, please. Inside my input folder, I want to make another folder called actions. Right? Here's my actions folder. I want to add in 3 actions. I want to add a jump action, a move action, and a look action. Those 3 actions. Okay, let's do them. So inside my actions folder, I want to right click and I want to go to where it says input. And I want to go to input action. Okay? And I want to type in IA, input action, that's what it stands for, underscore, and then it would be jump. Let's do that one first. IA jump. Let's do another one. So again, I want to do input, input action, IA move. Another one. Input, input action, IA look. Those are the 3 input actions I want. Okay? I want to look, I want to jump, I want to move. For my look and my move actions, right? Jump is, I'm going to be using my space bar to jump, like normal, right? So if I look at jump, if you look at it, the value type is a Boolean, which means true or false. Am I jumping or not jumping? Am I pressing the button or not? That's what it does. This doesn't work, my friends, for IA look and IA move. I want to use something else. So let's open up IA look, right? And instead of using a bool, let's use a axis 2D vector. Axis 2D vector. Okay? I think that's what I had, right? Axis 2D. Yes. And let's close that off. I want to do the same thing for move. So I want to go for look, it's axis 2D, and for move, also axis 2D. All right? And once I've done that, I want to go here and save all. So just type in file, save all, right? And that'll save all these little things. Are we good? I want to go into the folder above this one now. So out of the actions folder, I left those actions behind. I'm in the input folder, and I want to right click, and I want to go input mapping context. Input mapping context, this one, okay? And I want to name this input mapping context underscore FPS, right? IMC FPS, right? IMC FPS. Okay, now this is where we can have some fun. And there's the old way of, I just saved everything. There's the old way of adding an input mapping or input, right? Which is something we're not using. I'm showing you the new way. The new way as of, I believe, Unreal Engine 5.1, okay? Before 5.1, there was the old way where you added in like inputs right inside your project. We're not doing that. We're doing it this way, okay? So this is the new input mapping methodology. So I'm going to double click on the IMC FPS asset we just made, right? And on the left, you can see mappings. So these are where we do all our mappings. So the first mapping I want to do is the jump mapping. So I'm going to go here and add mappings. So I click this plus button. And I want to go here and add in jump. Okay, there's my jump. And then inside here, notice that there's a little keyboard and it says none. If I click on the keyboard, it activates it. And if I press the space bar, it selects space. Okay, it's a quick way of doing the input mapping. So now space bar is associated with my jump action. Make sense? Next, let's do the next mapping. I want to do the look mapping. Okay, so again, I want to do IA look. This is the one I want to map, right? And what do I want to do for this? Now this is tricky, and instead of me doing clicking the space bar, I want to kind of select my mouse, and I want to do this mouse XY 2D axis. That's the input mapping that I'm going to use. Okay, so it should look like this: mouse XY 2D axis. So why is this? That means when I move my mouse to the left or right or up and down, you know, then I'm pretty good. That's what it means. Up and down, left and right. Okay. And then the last one is the most tricky one. So I'm going to add another mapping up here. I want to add another mapping that's IA move. Here's the IA move mapping. And now I want to add in 3 submappings. 4. WASD. All right. So the first one, I click the keyboard and click in W. All right. And I want to click this little plus on the side here. So there was this plus up here, but I want to click this plus over here on the side. If I click this little plus, I get another mapping. And let's just do WA. There's another one. Let's click this plus again. And then S. And then click this plus again. And then D. Okay, there's this stuff. But I need to change some stuff. Here's what I need to understand. Because I'm giving it my mouse x-axis, the x-axis, which is right and left, is my default axis. All right? So same thing with my buttons. My buttons, the x-axis, which is D and A, that's the stuff that moves me left and right. That's the default axis, D and A. So D is positive. I'm moving to the right. Right is positive. A is negative, right? So this is what you do. You go to your A, and I want to go to modifiers, and I want to click this little modifiers button and change this to negate. That means if I get a negative value from my input, and I'm pressing A, right, it's moving to the left. That's what it means. I want to take my input, because I'm either pressing A or I'm not, right? A is either on or off, my buttons, right? W is on or off. If I go on, normally I get a 1. Negate means I get a negative 1, which means now I'm going in the opposite direction. Negative 1 means left, 1 means to the right, right? Okay, similarly, W and S, they're in the wrong axis. Remember, I'm getting input from my X and Y. I need to do something special here. I need to swizzle the axis. So on the W, I want to go to modifiers, and I want to add in a swizzle input axis values from this thing. And what this does, if you actually open this up, it changes the order. Instead of X, Y, Z, it goes Y, X, Z, where the Y axis, up and down, is the one I'm getting input from, or using input to, okay? So that's what I want here for modifier. Now, if you don't understand this, don't worry. We'll do this a bunch of times, but you'll see that this is the one thing there. So this W is swizzled. S is also swizzled, because we know that it's going to be using the Y axis. Let's add that in, swizzle that axis. But S is down, and we know that our forward or up movement is positive, and down is negative, which means we need to negate S as well. So let's add another modifier to S, right? Another modifier where we use negate, okay? So there's swizzle input axis values and negate. One more thing, all right? One more thing. Our IA look, right? I added in X and Y movement, but I want to negate, because when I pull up on my mouse, pull down my mouse, I want to look up, right? And when I move forward on my mouse, I want to look down, right? That's not going to happen here. When I move up, it's going to look up, and when I move down, it's going to be the opposite. So we need to also negate the IA look. Let's do that. So IA look modifier, I want to put negate, but in negate, I want to choose which one I'm going to invert. I don't want to invert the X. That means like when I'm going right, I'm actually going left. I don't want that, right? And I don't want to invert the Y, or the Z. I only want to invert the Y, that one. Okay, so that's what you're going to put in here. So you can choose which ones to invert. Does that make sense? All right, so now we have all of our inputs. This is a great place to put this up on DevOps. We've just added inputs, right? So save all, so file, save all. Let's see how we can do this with a command line. So go back to your, hopefully you've kept your command line open, right? Yes? And we can just do something like this. We can say git add dot, git commit -m, and we'll say something like added input actions, right? And there we go. You can see that we added all those assets, right? And we've got all that done. You should be able to do this too. Yes? I'm just doing git stuff. I'm not doing DevOps. So are you doing the real with me?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so you should be able to do this, no problem. Even if you can't push, you should be able to do this. All right, so this is it. This is good, right? We've added some input actions. Now what I want to do is I want to map all these in blueprints. Let's go to blueprints. And I want to go here into my FPS, BP_FPS blueprint, and I have all this garbage, right? What I want you guys to do, guys, is I want you guys to delete everything in here. So let's not have any of this stuff. No, none of this stuff, okay? Because I don't need it, as you're going to see. What I want to do is I want to start off with some of the stuff that we're going to go back into here, and we're going to add everything from scratch. So I've done all this stuff. If you follow along with the PowerPoint presentation, I've come to this point, and now we're going to add in event begin play again. Let's do that. So if I type in event begin play, you can see that that'll come up, and so you can see my event begin play. Any of these events, these are like, in my opinion, event begin play is similar to start on the Unity right side, right? So if you're if you're on the Unity side and use the start function, that's what this is, event begin play. It will trigger one time, okay? It won't trigger more than once. So anything that you've attached to this as a blueprint, It'll run one time. When your BP FPS character gets added to the scene for the first time, this is what's going to trigger for one time, okay? What we want to do here is what it says. We want to get the controller, so we can do that. We can say get controller, right? Get controller is the controller for the character, the default character controller. And then what we want to do is we want to cast this to the player controller. So again, I want to drag this, right? And I want to put in this cast to, and then player controller. Cast to player controller. That's what I just did. Okay, and then connect them. All right? So again, I'm taking the the default controller for the pawn. Remember? Because character inherits from the pawn superclass. Now I'm using the words for you guys. Character inherits from the pawn superclass. What it's doing with the pawn superclass has a controller. It's the pawn's controller, but I want a very specialized version of the controller. Remember I showed you that map? The player controller. So I've got to cast it. When I cast, I convert it to something that is exactly what it is. It's actually the player controller that I have, but I can't access the player controller directly. I've got to access the one that's in the pawn, right? Okay, next. Now that I have the character controller, I want to get access to the enhanced input local player subsystem. Let's do that. So again, I want to say input local, get enhanced input local player subsystem. Okay, it's coming from here, right? From this little line here, right? And then once I've got that, what I want to do is I want to add a mapping context. So I want to say add mapping context. There it is, right? And then from here, connect these two things up. Yay! The mapping context is the one we just created. So let's select that one. So we're going to say IMC FPS. This should come up, okay? And you're going to see that it should look like this. Are you with me? This is on the PowerPoint, by the way. If you actually go to the PowerPoint, if you're behind, go to the PowerPoint, it tells you all that stuff. And if I'm too fast for you, please access the PowerPoint the entire time. And if you want to get ahead of me, you can go ahead, right? And I'll catch up. All right, so now what you can do is you can add a comment. If you highlight all these things together and I press the C button on the keyboard, I get a comment. And I can add something like added input mapping context, which is what I kind of did. That's what we did here. And we can change the comment color, any color you want. I'm going to choose black. So here, I'm going to choose the comment color on the right-hand side. I just chose this thing right here, right here. And then you can choose whatever color you want. I'm going to choose black. There's black. And then once we've decided on the color, I can take this color. This is important, guys. Take a look here before you move on. Take a look. Any color you chose, I can save this color by dragging and dropping it up here. Okay? And now that color is there, and I can choose that color every time. And then press OK. So now I've got my black little comment. Yay! My input mapping context. Next, following the PowerPoint, I want to add in logic for moving left and right and moving forward and back. So again, what it says here is enhanced input action IA move. This is interesting. So the way you get that is if you were to, again, all I'm doing here when I'm moving up and down is right-clicking and holding, and that moves my, my context, my blueprint up. Okay, so right-click here, and if I type in IA underscore, you can see that I've got all the input actions that I created earlier, just now, right? So I want to get the move input action, there it is, and I want to open this up. I want to expand this action here so it looks like this, okay? And what I want to do is two things. I want to get control rotation. That's the first thing I want, so let's try that. So get control rotation, not controller, get control rotation. Control rotation, that's the one I want. And I also want to get, because I'm moving left and right, I want to get the right vector. Let's try that. So let's get right vector, right? And I want to get it for my character, not my gun mesh or anything else. My character, this one here, get right vector. Because there's a bunch of other ones, right? We don't want these ones, we want this one, get right vector. And by the way, it says actor right vector, that's the right one. And if you look at here, it says get right vector, and there's this is get actor right vector. Let's get the right one. Let's try that again. So get right vector, make sure it's the right one. Okay, and then what I want to do is I want to right click on this pin. Look at this pin right here, guys. I'm going to zoom in. This pin right here, I want you to right click, and I want you to split the struct pin. Split struct pin, same thing here. I want you to right click and split the struct pin, okay, like this. And what this is going to do is it's going to expand the struct. Remember we talked about this just earlier, what a struct is compared to a class. It is a data type. The data type here includes, it's a vector that includes x, y, and z components for your rotation. Okay? All I'm doing is expanding it so we can see them all. That's all I'm doing. Okay? And just like the PowerPoint says, I want to connect the roll to the x and the yaw to the y. All right? So it looks like this. Roll to the roll, yaw to the yaw. All right. And then I want to add movement input. Here's my add movement input. And then I want to connect, when I trigger this movement, I want to connect this up here. This is when it triggers, this is when it fires. And the output of my right vector is a vector. That's what it does. And I want to kind of connect it to the world direction. So this is what it's doing. So basically what I'm saying is, when I press the X, the D and A buttons, I'm going to move towards the right or left. So then I can highlight all these, right? And I can use that. Now there's one thing we're missing. I'm just going to move these up. So I can take these two things and shift and move them up together. There we go. And then there's this action value. Remember this action value? We have two action values, right? So here on the left-hand side, under IA move, I can right-click and split the struct pin, and I get X and Y axis over here, X and Y. So I want to use the X value to scale how much I'm going to move. So this is like when I press the button, my W button. And you can add these little, if you double-click on this line, you can add a control, a little routing node. I can double-click again to add another one. And so I can make this look a little nicer, like so. Are you with me? Okay. And then what I can do is I can take this whole thing, anything that's highlighted here like this, and add another comment. I can add a comment that says, move, right, left, right? And I can kind of squeeze this in, so it kind of looks like this, move right, left. I can also change my color so it's black, and like this, and press OK. There we go. Move right, left. Okay? With me? I want to do the same thing for up, down. So I want to get the control rotation. Let's just copy this node. So I'm going to take this, copy it, Control C, right? And then wherever my mouse is, if I press Control V, I get that node again. There's my get control rotation node, right? That's why I can do that. And then what I want to do is, instead of getting the right vector, I want to get the up vector. So I want to right click and I want to say get up or forward vector. Let's say here's my forward vector. Here's my forward vector. And then I want to split the struct pin, just like we did before. And this time, all I want to do is connect the yaw together, right? So if again, you look at the PowerPoint, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm connecting this one. So there's the forward vector, right? And then I still want this add movement. So let's grab this node, Control C, and then I can go over here, Control V, and I want to connect these two up, just like before. And then what I want to do is I want to connect the execution pins of these nodes. This one here should connect to that one there, right? That's the execution pin. The white pins are always, the big ones, are the execution pins. That is your line of programming to go from one thing to the other. Now we still need a scale value, and I'm going to zoom out, and you can get that again from the Y, right? So I scaled the left and right movement from the X, because I'm pressing the D and the A, that goes left and right, but I want to move on the Y, that's the W and the S, I want to go forward and back, and so I want to take the Y, and I want to just drag it all the way over here and connect it to this scale over here, okay? And again, I can use reroute nodes. I can double click on this thing, so make it nicer, right, like this, and double click on this one, and we can make it so that it kind of appears down here, underneath everything. Okay, move that one too if you want. Make it simple and straight. And then we can kind of highlight this one like this, and then type in a C, and then we'll say something like move forward, back. And again, we can add in the color that we want. There we go. And if I want to make these things look the same, I can choose this thing and pull it down here like that. And you can see that I now have a complete move right, left, forward, back. Are you with me? Yes?
For
Well, it's interesting because if you think about what the forward vector is, right? If I'm going just on one direction, right? Remember, I'm using my look rotation, and so if I'm looking to just straight on, right? Then left and right is this way, right? And then forward is this direction. And what happens is the yaw is the thing that's going to make me look forward wherever I'm going, just the yaw, right? Because it's like almost like I'm twisting it from the top. Okay, so think of that, and we'll move on. I got to move on for that, but that's the reason why it has to be like that for forward and back. And that's because of the get control rotation. Okay, so that's the first thing. And if I go back to my PowerPoint, it says the controller rotation feeding these values are for the right, and compile, save, and test your game. Let's do that. So we'll say compile, save, and test. Compile, save, and test. And at this point, we should be able to move left and right, forward and back. We should be able to do that right now. Yes? We have some movement in our game. How are you doing, my friend? You look like you're all stuck. I don't know what happened.
He's giving me access to my. It says I closed it before.
Is there any access? All right, put it on downloads. You have access. All right. So now that we have that, let's continue. Let's put this up on DevOps. So we're going to say something like git add dot git commit minus m, and we'll say added movement is what action. There we go, right? And then we can get. We're not going to push it. We're just going to add it. Notice I haven't pushed the DevOps. I only just added the actions, and this just this just modifies files. That's all it does. So it keeps track of what I'm doing. Let's go back. Let's add the next one. Again, you can speed ahead of me. You don't have to wait for me. So I'm going to get IA underscore look. Here's the look action. I'm going to zoom in there, and I'm going to pull this open again. And just like it says here in the PowerPoint, what I'm going to do is I only need an add controller yaw and add controller pitch, right? I need to add those two things in there. So back to this. So I'm going to say add controller yaw, right? And I can say add controller pitch. There we go. Those are the two things I want. And then just like we did before, our action, input action here, I'm going to split the struct pin, the action value. The X is going to scale this value, and the Y is going to scale this value, just like we did before, right? And I can kind of pull this up like this to make it look a little nicer. The trigger is going to be here in this one, and it's going to carry forward in here for this one. So you can see it kind of looks like this. And if you look at it in our PowerPoint, that's kind of what it looks like here too, all right? So yaw and pitch. Pitch is up and down, right? And yaw is left and right. So this is looking left and right. So this is look left and right. So see, look, left, right. And this one over here, so just around this one, and we'll say look up, down. That's what this does. And I can change the colors of these ones just like we've done before to black, right? There we go. And then you can make these nicer, and we'll talk about making it nicer later, but you can basically make these a straight line if you want. And let's test this out. Now there's one thing we have to do. If you look at the PowerPoint, it says we have to change the pawn's use control rotation pitch on, or else we won't get the right movement. So let's do that. So that is inside of here. If you click on the character itself, and if I type in pitch, right, where it says use controller rotation pitch, that's the one I have to turn on. Use controller rotation pitch. You can also put the whole thing in here, but I need to check this on. Okay, use controller rotation pitch. And I've chosen this one, BP underscore FPS character, to get this option. Let's try this out. Compile, save, and test. Let's try this out now and see if we have movement. So now I can look up and down, left and right, and I can move where I'm looking. Okay, I can move where I'm looking. Okay, back and forth, I can do that. Okay, and I get shadows on my gun and all that kind of really cool stuff. Great. One thing I want to do is, I'm going to go back to this and notice something. The gun mesh also is casting shadows. So I want to take that off. So I want to say shadows for the gun mesh. I want to receive shadows, but I don't want the gun mesh to cast shadows, right? So notice that I can receive shadows, but I don't want to cast shadows, right? So cast shadow on the gun mesh should be unchecked. So if you test that out, compile, save, and test, you can see that right now I don't have any gun shadows anymore. No gun shadows, no arm shadows. Okay? This is great. Let's file, save all, right? And let's go back to thing and put this up on, or make another commit. Git add dot, git commit -m. We'll say added look action. That's what we've done there. Last one is the jump action. So back to this, right? I have the same thing. I have IA underscore jump. Jump action is really simple because we have this thing called jump, right? And there's another one called stop jumping, right? It's actually built in. Jump and stop jumping, all right? So this is different because we're using input from our keyboard. So here's when we don't want to use a trigger for this. We want to use a different action altogether. I want to use started. So when I use the started input, the trigger, that's when I want to jump. So when I press the button. And then I want to stop jumping when I stopped pressing the button, as an example. That's what you have to put here instead. So this is the jump action. So again, put here, we'll call this the jump action, right? And then again, what I want to do is I want to change the color of this to black because that's my color that I'm using. Let's test this out, compile, save, and test. And you can see that when I roll now, if I go forward, I can jump, and I have my jumping action defined, okay? I'll tell you right now, guys, compared to Unity, this is way easier to set up in 3D compared to setting up 3D character from scratch in Unity. Super, way more difficult in Unity to do, right? So this is great. I've got motion, and let's do another commit, and I'll put this up on GitHub this time. I'll say git add dot git commit -m, and we'll say completed basic movement. And I'm going to push this to DevOps. Okay? There we go. Are you with me? Okay, here's my fear, that we're going to go overtime today. All right? I'm going to continue. If you have to leave at 11, you can leave. But I'm going to continue so you can have everything you need for your in-class exercise 2. Okay? Just letting you know. And I fear this because I see the time, and we're chugging in terms of getting things done. All right, next part. We did this in blueprints. That's nice. But remember, this course is about C++. So if you're afraid, and sometimes you're afraid, you had homework to do. And one thing we talked about in the homework was this idea of the gameplay framework, which is kind of what I defined earlier with our game mode. I talked about this, so hopefully you read this. Right? If not, please read the documentation. It's very important for you guys to know this. Next, I'm going to zoom through here. I also talked about the Unreal Engine reflection system. So the reflection system is just a way of annotating all of our values here, so that way it's not as bad. And what I mean by that is it connects to C++ connects to our blueprints, right? So here's what I want to do. This is my scope with what I want to do here, okay? And this is what I wanted you guys to read here too. I'm going to skip over this to come to this point right here, okay? Now you could follow around on this on your own and do this whole thing, but I want to guide you because there's some areas, there's mines you're going to trip over and explode, okay? I'm just letting you know right now. It's going to happen, okay? Some of you will not be able to do this. So let's do this together. So first of all, here's my scope. I want to disconnect all the little movements we just did. We tested movement, it worked great. And I want to do everything from C++, not from blueprints at all. Okay? Now we're talking. All right? This is the challenge for today. This is your in-class exercise 2 and the second half of your in-class exercise 2. Let's do it. So the way we do this is this. I want to go back to this, and I want to go to Tools at the top. Okay? Follow me, guys. Very important. Tools. And I want to click New C++ Class. Okay, New C++ Class, right here. It's going to bring up this dialog box, and I'm going to choose Character. So it's going to be a character type C++ class. What this means is that my custom C++ class is going to inherit from the character class that's built into Unreal Engine. Okay? I'm going to click Next. And here, let's name this thing FPS character, like this, okay? Notice what it's going to do. It's going to create a header file, a .h and a .cpp, the stuff we talked about at the beginning of this lesson, okay? A .h and a .cpp. Let's click Create Class, all right, and see what happens. So what this is going to do now is it is going to open up a new version of Visual Studio. If you have one open, it doesn't matter. And it's going to ask you some questions. It's going to say, you know, I'm going to add some code, you know, as an example. And it's going to say, do you want me to edit the code right now? Now, if it takes long, like this is taking for me, don't worry about it. Just let it do its thing, okay? Generating files, and it says, project now includes sources. Please close the editor and build from your IDE. Okay, let's press OK here. And it says, successfully added the FPS character. However, you must recompile the FPS starter project module before it will be appear in the content browser. Would you like to edit the code now? And I'm going to say yes. And it's going to bring up another copy of Visual Studio for me. Okay, so I have two copies. One from this earlier this morning, where we did our little person class and student class, and now one from here. You should see this message. It says, loading project 1 of 52. If you don't see that, your Visual Studio is not set up properly. Okay? You also will see this, which is Unreal Engine configuration, blah, blah. Uncheck this, please. Uncheck this. You don't see that. You don't have to see this again. It's not necessary. Okay? And then you're going to see this. Okay, what I want you to do now, before we do anything else, is go to Unreal Engine, the editor. Here's the editor. File, save all, close, please. Close that editor down. You cannot continue if the editor is open. Just letting you know in advance. Are you with me? Okay, we've added a C++ class. We called it FPS character. We closed down our editor, and we're running as fast as I can to the end, right? Next, what I want to do is I want to collapse all this stuff. All I care for is this FPS starter project in the Solution Explorer on the right-hand side. Do you see this? Notice that the FPS starter project, right? Notice that what it is highlighted or bolded. This means this is the starter. This is the start project for this solution. The solution is called FPS starter project, and so too is this thing right here, okay? Inside that, we have a source folder or filter. There's the source filter. Inside the source filter, we have a FPS starter project filter, another one. And you can see inside there that we have our FPS starter project build.cs. .cs is a C# file, okay? We're going to double click on this, please. We need to do this now. So double click on this FPS starter project.build.cs. Do that now, okay? When you bring this up, you will see this, okay? And I want to talk about this for a second, okay? So by default, Unreal Engine uses the new enhanced input system. It's built in as a plugin. So when you run it, it's activated inside of Unreal Engine. Just because a plugin is activated in Unreal Engine doesn't mean it's activated on the C++ side. C++ is modular, like I talked about last time. So what we need to do here is we need to add in the enhanced input system, subsystem, here and rebuild our C++ and Unreal Engine project right through here. So here under input core, at the end of this one, I'll make this a little bigger so you can see it, or a little smaller. You can see that I have this public dependency module names add range. And in the public dependency modules at the end, I want to add a comma, and I want to add in, if I press Control Space, by the way, it'll try and hunt for it, but it's going to be enhanced input, okay? And press Save. You need to have this in. If you don't do this, everything else that we do to add input will not work, okay? Let's go back to, from here, let's go back to the PowerPoint for a second. It does tell you to do this. So if you go back here, it shows you to double click on the build. It shows you to add in the enhanced input part right here. So again, if you missed it, the PowerPoints guide you to set this up. This sets up your enhanced input. Now what we need to do is what it says here. Make sure that Unreal Engine is closed and press Control F5. Control F5. So again, back to this, and then if you press, we can save this file and close it now. And if we press Control F5, it should launch, it should rebuild your project. That's what it should do. And it should launch Unreal Engine right from Visual Studio. Okay? This is our workflow. First, we make a change in Visual Studio. Then we press Control F5 and we launch the editor. Then we do some stuff with the editor, and then we close the editor down, go back to Visual Studio, make some changes, Control F5, it opens up the editor again, and back and forth. The editor, my friends, can never be open when you are making a change, and you can't do Control F5 when the editor is open. It's going to error out. Okay, just letting you know. Now, if everything was done well, it's going to recompile Visual Studio and your the stuff, and it might give you an error like this. Some of you won't get this error, okay? But you might get an error like this. Don't worry about it, okay? And I'm glad we got that error because I can fix it for you, okay? I don't need the launcher. The launcher can close, okay? But here's something that you can do, just in case Visual Studio, in a funny way, errors out. Make sure, again, that you have everything right here, that it says enhanced input. It has to be named like this. You have to add a comma in here and all that stuff like it says. So if I go back to Visual Studio, let's make sure there's nothing else open. So this other person class, if you have it open, close it up. Like that's important to do too. And sometimes you can get away with just going to build and then go just to build solution, Control Shift B at the top. So I can do Control Shift B, build solution, and it'll rebuild the solution with nothing else open, just this. So one thing I may have done wrong is I had the other editor open and whatever. It could also be that the build, this thing here that I did, if I typed in the wrong thing other than enhanced input, that will also make this whole thing fail, all right? So here it said ready, okay, but I have 78 errors. You might have no errors. Do you have errors? Wow, okay. And then if I try and type in Control F5 again, right, it's gonna build again, and it's gonna try one more time. So this is something you can try. Okay, now this happens, by the way, guys, don't panic is the answer, right? Because there's always ways around this. It's build failed. So if you get to this build failed thing and it won't launch, right? Read what it says, why it failed. It'll tell you here, candidate open source file fpsgenerated.h, could not do this kind of stuff. And sometimes what really solves this problem is if I close down Visual Studio and relaunch it. Let's do it again. So I'll close down Visual Studio, and I'm going to relaunch it. I'm going to go back to here. And notice that there now is a FPS starter project.sln file. Let's double click on that. Right? And then we're going to use Visual Studio always, and it's going to bring up the solution right here. Okay? So this is important to do because, again, what it's going to do is reload the solution. Sometimes it needs to be reloaded, and then it'll compile properly. Sometimes I need to do one more step, and I'll show you the step I need to do in a second. Okay? All right, so now that I'm here and it's loading, I don't need this issues window so big, but we're going to just drag it down here. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to try and do it again. Let's press Control F5 and try one more time. All right, so it's going to redo it again. So if you have this problem, all I did was restarted Visual Studio, and I still get this error. It didn't clean up the error. And that's okay. Okay, it really is. So how do we fix it? Close everything down, close Visual Studio down, and inside of your folder structure, you have binaries, all right? You have intermediate, you have saved, right? And you have derived data cache. Those all can be deleted. Let me show you what I'm talking about here. So if you have a problem like this, I can click on binaries, intermediate, saved, and derived data cache, and I can delete those parts of my project, okay? Then what I can do is after I've done this, if I right click on my project, and if I go show more options, you'll see that here that there is a generate Visual Studio project files. Do you see that? Click that, please. And what it's going to do, it's going to regenerate those files for you and build manually. Sometimes we need to do this. If it fails, there's some other issue with your project, okay? But notice here how it did not fail for me, okay? It built everything. Next, what you need to do is now double click on this to launch the editor right one more time. So let's double click on this, and it's going to say, hey, do you want to rebuild, this was built with a different engine, do you want to rebuild this? And the answer is yes, I do. And what it's going to do is it's going to build up, it's going to rebuild the editor. So I can show you the log on this one, and you can see how it's rebuilding the binaries and it is forcing Unreal Engine to rebuild everything. Now, why did I do all this? You know, because my build failed from Visual Studio, and sometimes that happens. So don't be miffed at that. It can happen. I'll be miffed if this doesn't work. That'll be an issue, but it did work. And the way I know it worked is, hello Unreal Editor, right? So this is what I'm expecting you guys to do. If somehow, Control F5, if it didn't work somehow, you've added a new feature, like the enhanced input system, especially modules. Modules, I feel, do this more than anything else. On Visual Studio, remember, you're connecting two big tools, Visual Studio and Unreal Engine, all at the same time. And sometimes those two things have issues. All right, so now let's run it to make sure nothing broke. So I can still run it, I can still do this stuff. That's good, I'm happy, I like that. And I can stop the engine, that's wonderful. Here's something that we have now. We have a new thing. If you look at the bottom, we have this C++ classes. And underneath there, we have this FPS character class. You can see that. That's what you should see now in your thing. So now we've added the classes to Unreal Engine. We want to inherit from our custom class, not the class that our BP_FPS character is inheriting from right now. So let's open up our blueprints going into BP_FPS character. And notice it opened up here because we killed the derived data cache. We also killed the editor settings. So the way we can fix that, by the way, is go into Edit, Editor Preferences, and then under here where it says the Asset Editor Open Location is default, choose Main Window. And then when we open up our BP_FPS character, it'll open up back in the main window again. All right, so what do I want to do? Notice at the top where it says Class Defaults, I want to click this other button called Class Settings. Let's click that. And under Class Settings at the top, you can see that there is a parent class that's character. Let's choose our FPS character. Let's type in FPS, and you can see that our FPS character class is now an option. There we go. If everything went well, and if I compile and save, please compile and save, and we can run it to test it, our blueprint now inherits from our custom C++ class. Are you with me? All we've done is repoint from the default character class to our custom FPS character class that we just made. Okay? Now, this is a beautiful thing. Now we have power. All right? And here's what we're going to do. I'm going to go to my FPS character and double click on the C++ class here. Right? It will bring up Visual Studio again, just like it did before. All right, now it's going to say loading project 1 of 52 and all that kind of stuff. Are you with me? I'm killing you, right?
I just have to switch over to my phone.
It's a lot. I know. That's why I made the PowerPoints, and we're making the videos too. Right? So, all right. And what I want to do now is I want to reorganize some of this stuff. And let me tell you what I want to reorganize. Notice that there is up at the top here. There's like here's the FPS character.h. And here's the FPS character.cpp. Notice the two, right? Well, on the FPS character.h, we have two public areas. What the hell? Unreal Engine, by default, gives us two public areas. One for the constructor function and one for the public. Notice it also says a FPS character. The reason why it's named a FPS character here in C++ is because character comes from actor. So it actually tells you the inheritance chain here. Character is of type actor, an actor type, right? That's what it is. Notice it says it's inheriting from, there's the inheriting from our public A character, which is the default built-in character from Unreal Engine, not ours, right? All right, and then we have a generated body, and we have this, FPS character generated age. Guys, I'm just telling you this once in the beginning. Never have any includes after this thing. Okay, all your includes have to come before this thing. Okay, if you put includes after generated.h, your project will never build. Just letting you know. Here's what I want to do. Get rid of all the comments, please. Okay, let's do that. No comments, no comments here. And I want to get rid of this comment too. There we go, and whatever. All right. There we go. And what I want to do is I want to move these two functions, function declarations from here. I want to cut them, and I want to move them over to here. There we go, like this. And again, I want to kill this public area right here. There we go. All right, so that's my first change. My first change to the .h is just reorganizing public and protected and getting rid of all the comments. No comments. Are you with me? Next, I want to do the same thing for my FPS character.cpp. On the CPP side, all I want you to do is get rid of all the comments. That's all I want you to do, is get rid of them. So just please make sure you don't delete anything that's valuable, but anything else like comments, get rid of it. Wonderful. All right, take a look at what we have. We have a begin play. I'm looking at the CPP now. We have a begin play. We have a tick method, and we have something else, set up player input component. So, and we have this, which is a constructor function, right? So constructor function and this set up player input component does not exist on the Unreal Engine side. Okay, we don't have these two, not really, but we do have these two, and these are the exact same. Also, notice this super call. Super means call the super constructor, right, and call the super constructor function first before we get to this. It's important we do this, guys, because we always want to call the base class's constructor function first. What this means is we're inheriting from character class. We made our own character class called FPS character, right? And I want to still activate the default begin play and tick functions from that other class that I'm inheriting from. Okay? Now that I've done this, I want to look at the PowerPoint to help us speed along, and I want to do, there's a quick word about pointers. So Connor, has he talked about pointers yet with you guys? So pointers are interesting. So there's two things about pointers. So variables in C#, the way we look at C# right now, is we have variables, and the variables that we've created in C# just hold data. So we have an integer that holds an integer data. Strings hold string data. That's C#, right? C++ gives us one more construct. Not only can we look at a variable as an example and get value, but we can also look at it as a memory location. So we can get the variable's reference as opposed to getting its value. And so what pointers do allows us to get the variable's reference. So remember we talked about this. Passing things by value is more expensive than passing things by reference. Because when I pass things by value, I make a copy of the entire thing when I'm passing it into the function. We don't want this. We just want to point to the reference that's already been created. Otherwise, our system becomes really, really slow, right? So, so here, the ampersand sign means the address of, and the star means value at the address, or it's a dereference operator. That's what it is, okay? And these are considered raw pointers. But what we want to use instead, I'm going to skip this part, is in Unreal Engine, we don't want to do this. We could do this. This is okay. But a way of better than this in Unreal Engine, in the latest version of Unreal Engine, is we want to use a wrapper, and it's called TObjectPointer. TObjectPointer is a generic wrapper that creates our pointer and allows us to share that pointer and manage it better for memory management. Okay? Otherwise, it's a raw pointer. And pointers, my friends, in C++ are the worst things, the thing that messes you up more than anything else. Connor's going to tell you about them shortly when you guys do more stuff with graphics with Connor. Okay? Pointers are used everywhere in C# and C++. And so here, we're going to use something called TObjectPointer, which is a wrapper that wraps around this UObject pointer. Okay? And it basically enhances garbage collection, which is for memory management. All right, that's a short word on that. Let's get back into this. So what I want to do next is I've done this piece. I've kind of said, hey, I reorganized that kind of stuff, and I kind of show you this, the .h and the .cpp, we've reorganized this now, right? And what I want to do now is I want to generate my classes and objects. Let's do this together. So back to this. So I want to create a couple of things here. So one of the things that I want to do, and I've kind of mentioned here, is I want to get a jump function. The jump function is what we want to use. That's built in. Remember, there's jump and stop jumping. It's here too. Let's do that. So at the top here, we can say something like virtual jump, right? Virtual void jump, actually. Is it virtual void jump? Virtual void jump. Woohoo. And then override. So what I'm saying is I want to override the jump function that's built in. Okay, that's what I'm doing first. I don't have to do anything else, just this for that size. So that's the jump function. Next, what I want to do here is I want to add our input mapping context. So this is something interesting. Notice that I want to create a reference to something called a U input mapping context, right? A U input mapping context. But that's a class. And at the top, notice that what I'm going to do is I'm going to do these forward declarations. Remember I talked about this? I don't want to include or include anything extra in here, because if I include the input action value, which is a struct, or my input mapping context, or my input action, that means every time I reference my character class, I'm including those things. I'm injecting them right in here. I don't want to do that in my .h. I want to do that kind of stuff in my .cpp. So what I'm saying here with forward declarations is, don't worry, C++ and Unreal. I promise you I'm going to declare these later on. That's what I'm saying with these ones, okay? So what I want to do here is I want to do this. I want to include two things. First, two movement callbacks. Callbacks are just another fancy name for functions that I'm going to use to do the move and the look. Okay, so let's do that next. So these are movement callbacks. And I want to call them exactly what I say here, void move. Right, and my void move needs this if input action value. So it's going to be a const f input action value. But C++ at this point doesn't know what if input action value is. So at the top of my file, I'm going to just use a forward declaration where I'm going to say struct f input action value. And then what that does is it silences that error, because I'm telling C++, hey, don't worry, I promise that I'm going to have this struct defined later on. That's what I'm basically saying here. Okay? And I want to do the same thing for look. So void look, and I'm going to say, input action value is the one I want to use. Okay, there we go. This is the second thing I want to do. Next, what I want to start mapping now is I want to start mapping in my input properties, right? So here are my input properties. And what I want to do is, just like it says here, U property, remember I said macros are important? So I want to define a property called FPS context. Here's something I need to tell you, right, about this. Before, when we were using our blueprint, we just pulled down our FPS context, but there's nothing to pull down anymore. We don't have that. We're using C++. So I need to define a property that's going to appear in the editor in order for me to do this. This is the first thing that we're going to do. So first thing is we're going to do U property, edit anywhere, category input. So that's the thing. So U property, edit anywhere, category input. Okay, like this. If it's only one, name, you don't have to put quotation around the category name. All right. Edit anywhere means I can edit it any place I am, and then the property is going to be the input mapping context, right? So again, just like before, I don't want to use raw pointers. I want to say class the U input mapping context, right? That's what that is, and you can see that that is the input mapping context class that I want to use, right? And this is where I use the T object pointer. So T object pointer, U input mapping context, and we're going to call this the FPS context, if I'm not wrong. Yes. Okay? So that's what that is. So let me explain these two lines. Okay, I know we're overtime now. We're running into overtime, guys. If you have to go, I totally understand. It's 11 o'clock. You may have other commitments or whatever, but here's where I'm going to talk about. U property. What this is a macro, all right? And it basically points to T object pointer FPS context and says, hey, I want this to be connected to our blueprint, the related blueprint. We have a related blueprint. Remember, we have a blueprint called BP underscore FPS character that inherits from this class. That's what it does, all right? So that's what this thing is. This is basically creating a context for that. Okay. Next, we want to do the same thing with our category input. We want to do the same thing exactly, but for a movement action, a look action, and a jump action. Let's do that. But this time it's going to be slightly different, right? So we're going to say T object pointer, and we're going to say U input action, right? And we're going to call this the move action. Now, U input action is not defined, so instead of importing it, we're just going to forward declare it. We're going to promise that we're going to do it later on. That's all we're doing up here at the top. So the forward declaration, what it does is, it just declares, it just tells the Unreal Engine editor, hey guys, don't worry, in Visual Studio, don't worry, I promise I'm going to declare this later on. I'm going to tell you what this is. So that's why I use these forward declarations. So move action is the next one, okay? And just like I have, this is movement, let's call it movement action. That's what we said, movement action. And I'll do the same thing with our look action. Here's our look action, as well as, no, I was trying to guess what I'm going to do, with our jump action. Okay, that's what I want to do as well. So this is the jump action. So again, I can copy this part. This is like the same, copy paste, copy pasta. And then what I want to do is T object pointer, and I want a U input action, which is the jump action. So this defines a bunch of properties and 3 functions: jump, move, and look. Those are the 3 functions that we defined here, right? The properties are identical, my friends, 100% identical to the things that we're going to use in our actions that we've already defined. Again, this is all on my PowerPoint slide deck, so if you didn't get it, it's there for you to try out. And this is half right here, half of the stuff we need to do. We have nothing else to do here in the .h after this. So .h is done. The .cpp is the challenge though. So make sure this is saved, and let me know when I can move on. Can I move on? You guys good? Kind of?
I have all written down.
You what?
I have all written down.
All written down. Awesome. And for you guys? Everyone else okay? Good? Let's move on to the CPP. So the way we get those things in the CPP is there is a, if I right click, if I click onto a function like this, jump, there's a little hammer or a tool that comes up like this. See, notice there's a little tool? If I pull down, it says create definition for jump in fpscharacter.cpp. Do you see that? So then it does this. This is good. This is a good thing, right? So again, all I did was I went here, and then let's say for move, and there's a little screwdriver, and I kind of pull this down, and I say create definition of move, right? And in the CPP. Why do I want to do this? Instead of me typing this by hand, right? It pre-populates the function header, right, for me in exactly the right way. Let me talk about the function headers here in the C++ side. We kind of glanced through these when I did the person class and the student class. Okay, I want to talk about this. 1, we have the name of the class here with a delimiter, right? The delimiter says that move belongs to this class, AFPS character, which is the one we made. That's what this is, all right? This signature is the exact same as we had in the .h. There's no difference between the two, okay? The one thing that I want to add here in the jump is I want to add in a call to super, because I want to use the super jump function. Remember, it's built in. I don't want to redefine my own jump. I could, but I don't want to do that. I want to use one that's built in. Okay? So that's what I've done here. Now, this is the next tricky part. The next tricky part. Now that I have this, I have 3 things to update for the most part, right? Actually, I have 1 in begin play, 2 things to put in there, and a thing to put in my setup player input component, and then I'm done. Okay, but I want to explain these things. That's why it's going to take time. Back to the PowerPoint. All right? So I did this part up to here. And notice that also what I want to put in at the top is I want to include these 2 things. I want to include enhanced input subsystems.h, and I want to also include enhanced input component.h, those two things. Let's do that. So I want to include, I'm going to grab this little line here from the PowerPoint. Okay, I want to copy it, and I want to go back to the top of my .cpp, and in here I want to include, and I want to just pop that in. Okay. And I also want to grab the enhanced input component.h. Now, why am I getting this? This satisfies my requirements, right? This satisfies my requirements that I need, that I promise that I'm going to define what U input action is. I want to define what U input context is, all that stuff. I've just done it. When I included those two files inside my .cpp, it included all those definitions for me. So instead of me doing this inside of my .h, I don't want to do stuff in my .h like that. I don't want to include all these heavy things. Look, guys, I'll tell you right now, enhanced input subsystems.h and enhanced input component.h are massive. There are thousands and thousands of lines of code here. It's okay to include it in the CPP, but I don't want to include it in the .h. That is terrible to do, okay? It's really bad. All right, next. Save everything, please, okay? And go to the next slide. The next slide, I've made it easy for you, okay? Because I knew this was going to be a bit of a time crunch. I just want to grab these lines of code. I will explain them, but I'm not going to type them. It just takes too long. So here, let's go here and type it in. Okay, copy it in. So this goes inside of the begin play, and I want to talk about what this is. Take a look. It says, hey, player controller, I want to cast as my player controller, my a player controller type. So player controller, I'm going to cast it as this. That's what I'm saying, okay? And what this does is it takes the controller function, the controller, this input controller is built in. Remember, it's the pawn controller. So anything that I want to cast, this cast is what I'm doing, is I'm casting it to this type. This is the cast, which is player controller. So I'm taking my regular pawn controller and casting it to player controller and then saving it here as a pointer to this player controller. That's what I'm doing. And if I can do this cast, that means it's successful, and I'm going to go here to map everything. Here what I'm doing is I'm defining the subsystem, which is my U local player subsystem. That's what it is. And then I'm saying add mapping context, and I'm using my FPS context, which I defined in my .h right here, to map that in. That's what I'm doing. By the way, guys, if you look at my PowerPoint, the next slide basically shows you that this is identical for the most part to what I'm doing here in Blueprints. I'm just showing you the difference. This is what it looks like in Blueprints. This is what it looks like on the C++ side. Okay? Next, now that I've done this, I want to do the next one. I want to define the move function. So here's my move function. I'm going to grab all this code, and I'm going to talk about it in a second. I'm going to go into my move function and put it in, right? And let's talk about this. So the value that comes in to the move function is something that I'm defining as movement vector, right? That's the movement vector that I'm getting, right? And the movement vector has two parts. There's the x direction and the y direction. That's what the movement vector is, because I have a vector 2D. A vector 2D only has x and y. There's no z, okay? And then movement vector now can do x and y. You can see that x and y is used here. Well, if you look at what I'm doing is I'm getting the control rotation. Look at that. Get control rotation. That's the exact same function that I'm using on the Blueprint side. Look, this is the get control rotation function that I did earlier with you, right? So I'm doing the exact same stuff. I'm also getting the right vector for the movement left-right. Okay, well, let's take a look at that. If I go back here, you know, there's the right vector right here, right? So I'm getting the right vector, and then I'm mapping it to the direction, okay? So for the most part, this looks convoluted, but it's actually the exact same. It's just, this is what it looks like in code, and the other one, that's what it looks like on the C++ side, in Blueprints. Let's do the next part, which is this, right? So I'm going to grab this part, copy it, and go into the look value and put it in. You can see that this is the look. So I get x and y from my mouse, and then what I do is add controller yaw. I take the x for the yaw, which is this. So yaw is this. And pitch for the y, that's me moving my mouse forward and back. And I get that because the look axis vector is a 2D vector that only has x and y values, right? So that's the exact same thing. Here, this if get controller, this is an important check. It means it's checking to see if the controller is defined. If the controller somehow is not defined, you'll get a null pointer, and you don't want to get null pointers, it'll crash your code, okay? Finally, the setup player input component is what we want to do. That's the next one. And that's this thing, this little piece here. So I'm going to grab all this, and I'm going to talk about this in a second. So here, what I'm doing is, I'm just going to show you this whole thing. I'm just making, I'm mapping everything, right? I'm saying, hey, look, my move action, that's the move action that I've made, IA underscore move. That's on the blueprint side, right? That is going to trigger when I press the buttons, right? WASD. Well, when I press the buttons, all I'm saying is when these buttons are triggered, I want you to call the move function. That's what this does. So it links the move function that I just defined with you to the IA action in blueprints. That's what it's doing. Same thing with look. The look action is connected to the look action here, and the jump action is connected to the jump action here. Now this is not exactly correct. I'm just going to warn you that this is kind of weird, right? But the rest are all the same. Okay? Now that I have this, I need to go back to Unreal Engine over here, File, Save All, right? File, Save All, and I want to shut this down, okay? And then I want to save all here. This is important, and I want to press Control F5, and I want to rebuild from Visual Studio. Hopefully now it will work. If it doesn't, what are you going to do? Delete all those things again and go through the thing I just did earlier and rebuild manually. But luckily, guess what? I fixed whatever problems there were, and now I'm able to launch from Visual Studio. We're not done yet. We need to disconnect everything on the blueprint side to test everything out that I'm doing here. And this is part of your in-class exercise 2. That's why I'm going through it with you. Okay, and let me show you what I'm talking about here. This is the new stuff we just added in. Okay, so let's first of all test to see if everything is still working as is. We didn't mess anything up. Okay, let's just check that. So I'm press play, and we should still be able to do this. Okay, no problem, no difference, no changes, right? That's important. We should always check our project to make sure we didn't break it somehow. Okay, next, on the right, do this. Type in input. And notice that I have these spaces now in input. I have FPS context, I have a movement action, a look action, and a jump action. We need to manually map these things now, okay? Because remember, there's no connection between C++ and blueprints. We need to make that connection. Here's the connection. So FPS context, it's going to be this. Movement action, it's going to be IA move, right? Look action, it's going to be IA look. Jump action, it's going to be IA jump. Here it is, right? And now we've mapped everything. That's the first piece we need to do. Are you with me? So first we do that. We put input, we map all those things out. Next, to test this out, because we know this is already connected and it's working through C++, through blueprints, let's disconnect all these things, all right? So here's how you disconnect it. From the event begin play, you press the Alt button and left click. Alt left click disconnects the execution pin. And I can do the next one too. Alt left click, okay? Alt left click, and Alt left click, and Alt left click. And now when we see all this, if I press compile and save, right? Then if we still can move, guess what? Who's moving us? C++. Let's try it now. So press play, and guess what, guys? Hey, look at that, huh? We're moving with C++ now, and we're using everything. C++ is controlling all of our movement. My friends, this is in-class exercise 2. Do this, and you get 6% of your final grade. All right? So let's put this up on DevOps now. So to put it up on DevOps, safe thing to do is close the Unreal Editor. File, save all, please. File, save all. Now that we've built, close the editor. If you want to close Visual Studio, you can. That's not a bad practice, right? And then when I push to Unreal Engine, to thing, I can do the next push, which is to DevOps. Git add dot, git commit -m, and I'll say replicated movement in C++. I know it's a big commit, but it is what it is. Git push. And now that we've done that, you've got everything you need on the DevOps side. Okay? So that is your in-class exercise 2. So why did I go through it with you the entire way? This is my tour for you. I wanted to show you the workflow. That's what this exercise is. The movements wasn't important. We could have done anything. But I wanted to show you the workflow between C++ and blueprints. Okay, question for you guys now before I let you go for the day. What's easier to do, blueprints or C++ at this point? Blueprints, right? Blueprints are easier, but you're going to see in the future when we do a loop or something stupid like that, that the blueprints get to be like this big. And then you're going to be like, maybe C++ is better in this case. That's what I want to get you guys to, where you can decide when do I use C++ for efficiency and when do I stick with blueprints. Okay, that's what this course is all about. Okay, so that's what we're going to get to. Guys, thank you so much. This is in-class exercise 2. It's due Friday. That's tomorrow at midnight. Good luck. Connect with me if you have a problem. All right, thanks. I'll stop recording now. And thank you for sticking around for so long.